Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're retaking a trip deep into the Canadian wilderness to a place with a secret history that is stranger than fiction. We're heading to northwestern Ontario, near the town of Marathon, to uncover the story of Prisoner of War Camp 101. Now, when you think of Canada during World War II, you probably think of our soldiers fighting bravely overseas. But did you know that Canada was also home to thousands of German prisoners of war? Tucked away in the vast, rugged landscape of the Canadian Shield, far from any major cities, the government set up several POW camps. The idea was simple. The remote, harsh environment would be a natural deterrent to any escape attempts. After all, where would you go? It's just miles and miles of dense forest, lakes, and muskeg. One of the most fascinating of these was Camp 101, also known as Camp Angler. It opened its gates in early 1941, and its first residents were high-ranking German officers, U-boat crews, and Luftwaffe pilots. These weren't just ordinary soldiers. They were some of the most dedicated and skilled members of the German military, and as you can imagine, they weren't exactly content to just sit out the war peacefully in the Canadian woods. Life in the camp was a strange mix of routine and simmering tension. The prisoners were treated according to the Geneva Convention. They had barracks, a mess hall, and even recreational activities. They formed orchestras, put on plays, and took university-level courses by mail. Some even earned a small wage working in logging camps in the surrounding forest. From the outside, it might have seemed almost civilized, but beneath the surface, the desire for freedom was always there. The prisoners were constantly plotting, constantly looking for a way out, and that brings us to the most legendary event in Camp 101's history. The largest POW escape in Canada. It happened in April 1941, not long after the camp opened. A group of determined German officers, including a U-boat commander named Wolfgang Heller, masterminded an audacious plan. They decided to dig a tunnel. This wasn't some small makeshift hole. It was a serious engineering project. They dug it right under the noses of their Canadian guards using makeshift tools like shovels fashioned from tin cans and stovepipes. To hide the dirt they excavated, they were incredibly clever. They filled sacks made from pillowcases and trouser legs, then sneakily distributed the soil around the camp in garden plots, under floorboards, and even in the attic of their hut. They even rigged up a makeshift ventilation system using a fan powered by the camp's electricity. It was an operation straight out of a movie. On a dark, stormy night, 28 prisoners made their move. They slipped out through the tunnel one by one and vanished into the unforgiving Ontario wilderness. Their plan was ambitious. Some intended to hop freight trains heading east, hoping to reach the Atlantic coast and somehow get back to Germany. Others, believing a bizarre piece of misinformation, planned to hike south, thinking they could reach the United States, which was still neutral at the time, in just a few days. They had no idea they were hundreds of miles away from the border, separated by some of the most difficult terrain on the continent. The escape triggered a massive manhunt. The Ontario Provincial Police, local militia, and even civilian volunteers were called in. The entire region was on high alert, but the Canadian wilderness proved to be a far more effective prison than any fence. The escapees were ill-equipped for the harsh reality of the northern spring. They faced freezing temperatures, deep snow, and a landscape that seemed to go on forever. One by one, they were rounded up. Some were found huddled around fires, trying to stay warm. A couple of them actually made it onto a freight train, but were discovered at the next stop in Schreiber. One determined group, led by Wolfgang Heller himself, managed to evade capture for several days. They navigated by a stolen map and a compass made from a magnetized needle. They even managed to buy supplies from an unsuspecting store owner in a tiny village. But eventually, their luck ran out. Cold, hungry, and exhausted, they were all captured. Every single one of the 28 escapees was brought back to Camp 101. While the escape was ultimately a failure, it became a legend. It showed the incredible ingenuity and determination of the prisoners, and it served as a wake-up call for the Canadian authorities about the challenges of guarding such resourceful men. Security at all Canadian POW camps was tightened significantly after the Angler escape, but the story of Camp 101 doesn't end there. After the war in Europe ended, the German POWs were repatriated, but the camp wasn't shut down. Instead, it was given a new, and in many ways, more somber purpose. Starting in 1945, the camp was used to hold Japanese Canadian, and these were families, many of whom were Canadian citizens by birth, who had been forcibly removed from their homes on the West Coast earlier in the war. After being held in camps in British Columbia, some who resisted government pressure to either move east or agreed to be deported to Japan after the war were sent to Camp 101. For these families, it wasn't a prison for enemy combatants. It was a punishment camp for standing up for their rights. They were held there until the camp finally closed for good in 1946. Today, if you visit the site near Marathon, there's not much left to see. The forest has reclaimed most of the area, but if you look closely, you can still find remnants, old foundations, scraps of metal, and the faint outlines of where the barracks once stood. There's a historical plaque there now, commemorating the camp and its complex history, remembering both the German prisoners of war and the Japanese Canadian families who were held within its fences. It's a powerful reminder of a forgotten chapter of Canadian history hidden away in the northern woods. A story of war, escape, injustice, and survival, all centered on this one remote spot. It shows us that even in the most isolated places, the grand, dramatic events of the world can play out in incredible ways. So what do you think? It's a wild story, isn't it? Let me know in the comments if you've ever heard of Canada's POW camps before. And if you enjoyed this dive into a hidden piece of history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories you won't find in the textbooks. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next adventure.